The scary Peppa Pig episode that never aired on TV deep in the night, Peppa woke to strange creaking. Moonlight illuminated the bunk bed where George slept with his dinosaur. Peppa climbed down, feeling cold floor under her hooves. The hallway seemed endless in darkness. The living room door was ajar, though Mummy always closed it. Blue light emanated from behind. The television showed static without sound. Daddy's chair rocked as if someone had risen. A steaming teacup sat on the table, but parents were gone. Peppa called for Mummy and Daddy. Only silence. Their bed was empty and made. Strange, since they'd gone to sleep together. Returning, Peppa discovered George's disappearance. Only the dinosaur lay on his pillow, eyes glowing red in darkness. The toy turned its head toward Peppa. George's laughter echoed from the hallway, but sounded wrong, too deep. Peppa followed the sound downstairs, leading deeper than usual. The staircase led to a non-existent basement. Walls were covered with children's drawings, faces erased. A mirror in the corner showed Peppa's reflection smiling. Laughter grew louder, echoing off walls. Peppa saw George's silhouette, but approaching closer, found only a moving shadow. All lights went out simultaneously. In darkness, familiar voices whispered her name. Mummy, Daddy, George, but distorted, as if underwater. The house corridors had changed. Doors led to new rooms. Windows showed darkness. Clocks ticked backwards, hands moving counterclockwise. In the kitchen, moldy dinner was set. Milk had curdled. Family photos showed empty frames without faces. The front door opened. Parent silhouettes stood in the doorway without faces, only empty sockets with black smoke. Smiles stretched ear to ear. Peppa ran upstairs, but the staircase ended in emptiness. Something large climbed from below, breathing heavily and scraping claws. Barricaded in the bathroom, Peppa saw black water from the tap. The mirror showed a room of shadows approaching the glass from within. Knocking intensified. The family called in unison, voices merging into cacophony. The handle turned, though the door was locked. The door opened. The whole family stood with black eyes and unchanging smiles, extending hands toward Peppa. Peppa screamed and woke up. Sunlight flooded the room. George slept. Mummy cooked breakfast. But a black rose lay beside her. At breakfast, the family laughed at her nightmare. But in the window, Peppa saw her shadow in the yard, waving. Mirrors showed reflections with delay. At night, the dinosaur glowed red again. Since then, every night, Peppa hears laughter from the non-existent basement and sees independent shadows. The family lives normally, but their smiles last too long. The house remembers the nightmare and tries to return Peppa to dark reality each night. The boundary between dream and reality grows thinner every night.
Peppa Pig, the smiling one. It all started one evening, when the whole family was sitting in the living room. Daddy Pig was telling funny stories, George was giggling, and Mummy Pig was quietly smiling. Peppa laughed, loudly, sincerely, brightly, and then something else laughed too. Ha, ha, ha! It wasn't an echo, it was too slow, as if someone repeated her laugh, but not right away. Then again, ha, ha, ha! Peppa froze. "Did you hear that?" she asked. "What, darling?" said Mummy Pig. "Someone laughed with me, but weirdly." "Probably the TV." Daddy Pig waved it off, but the TV was off. That night, Peppa woke up from silence. George was breathing softly, the house didn't creak. Everything was still. And then, ha, ha, ha. Now it came from outside the window. Peppa stepped up to the glass. Behind it, a figure, tall, thin, too thin. Its head was long, snout narrow, mouth stretched into a wide smile, like it was cut open. No teeth, eyes, hollow, black, empty. It didn't move, it just watched. Then it said, "Peppa," in her voice, but delayed, as if it had heard it earlier and was now repeating it. Peppa jumped back, pulled the curtains shut and hid under her blanket. In the morning, she told no one, but at breakfast, George giggled again, and from outside the window came, he, the same voice, only closer. "Did you hear that?" she whispered to George. "What?" "It laughs. When we laugh." Later that day, Peppa went to Mummy Pig. "Who is he?" Mummy Pig looked at the window. "If you've seen him already, then he's close. He comes when someone laughs. He hears us through the laughter." "What does he want?" Mummy didn't answer. That night, Peppa woke up again. Everything was quiet, but on the window, a message from the inside, as if drawn by a foggy hoof. "I like how you laugh." Below it, scratches, 5 long ones. The family photo on the wall had changed. Everyone smiled. But Peppa, her smile was different, a little wider, too symmetrical, and her eyes seemed hollow. In the evening, she heard him again, first at the window, then in the hallway, then right outside her bedroom door. He was repeating her words. "Don't look, don't look." But she hadn't said that out loud, only thought it. In the mirror, he was there, standing behind her, smiling, long, without eyes, only a mouth. When Peppa turned, no one. "I am you," he whispered, just with the smile turned inside out. Since then, Peppa doesn't laugh, and she doesn't let George laugh either, because with every laugh, he gets closer, and one day, he'll smile with her face. Peppa Pig, tap, tap, tap. It started with a faint sound. One night, Peppa woke up to a soft tap, tap, tap. She sat up on her pillow, listened. Silence. Wind outside, rustling trees. Nothing strange. But as soon as she lay back down, tap, tap, tap. 3 short knocks, steady, as if someone tapped on the window. "Probably my imagination," she whispered to herself. She forgot about it the next morning. The day went on as usual. George played, the parents laughed, everything felt calm. But at night, it happened again. Tap, tap, tap. Exactly at 2:13 a.m. On the third night, Peppa couldn't resist. She walked to the window and peered into the darkness. Nothing. No one. Just the garden, swallowed in fog. She turned away and noticed, on the inside of the glass, hoof prints, as if someone had tapped from within. "George?" she whispered, but George was fast asleep. She checked. He hadn't moved. On the 4th night, Peppa stayed awake. Wrapped in a blanket, she sat watching the window. 2:13 a.m. Tap, tap, tap. Her heart clenched. She crawled closer, and for just a moment, it looked like someone was in the window's reflection. A figure, tall, thin, standing right behind the glass. But outside, there was no one. She shut the curtain and hid under the blanket. Didn't sleep until morning. In the daylight, everything seemed normal again. The marks on the glass had vanished. No one believed her. Daddy Pig said, "Just a draft." Mummy Pig smiled. Maybe it was a dream? Even George only shrugged. On the 5th night, she decided to write everything down. She opened a notebook, sat on the bed. 2:13 a.m. Tap, tap, tap. She jumped up and pulled open the curtain. Nothing, but in the reflection, her room, and another Peppa inside, standing by the bed, staring straight at the window. Was that the real one? Was she outside or inside? For a second, she didn't know who was who. She shut her eyes, counted to 10, opened them. The room was the same, but the glass, there was a word on it. "Let me in," drawn with a finger, from inside, on the misty glass. Peppa screamed and ran to her parents' room, but it was empty. No one. The beds weren't even made, as if no one had ever slept there. The hallway, dark, from her room, light, and a shadow approaching the window. Peppa stepped back, then heard it again. Tap, tap, tap. Not on the window now, on her bedroom door, and a voice, just like hers. "Peppa, you promised to let me in." Peppa Pig, the quiet room. It all started with a whisper. "Daddy, what's that door?" Peppa asked when she noticed it at the end of the hallway. Small, pale blue, with a faded plaque and no name. It hadn't been there before. A door? Daddy Pig scratched his head. Probably a closet. I never noticed it. But the door wouldn't open. No handle, no lock. Just a faint draft seeping from underneath. The next day, the door stood wide open, as if it had been waiting. Peppa carefully peeked inside. The room was completely empty. White walls, dusty floor, no furniture, no windows, and no sound at all, not even her own breathing. "Hello," she said. But there was no sound. None. No echo, no noise. Her voice vanished. Then Mummy Pig stepped in, tried to say, "What did you find, Peppa?" But nothing came out. Her lips moved, but the silence was like concrete. Daddy Pig clapped his hooves. Still nothing. Even footsteps made no sound in there. They started calling it the quiet room and decided to stay away from it. But George, on the third day, he disappeared. Daddy Pig searched the whole house. Peppa peeked into the quiet room and saw his hooves. He was standing in the corner, silent, still, not turning around. She ran to him and shouted, "George, let's go!" And he vanished, right in front of her eyes, as if he had dissolved. She tried to tell her parents, but no one believed her. The door slammed shut and wouldn't open again. The next morning, it was ajar. Inside, a dusty floor, and in the dust, 2 sets of hoofprints leading to the corner, but none leading back. Peppa took a notebook and pen, stepped inside, laid the notebook down, wrote, "Is there no way out?" The pen left no marks, as if anything connected to speech just disappeared. She stepped out. Silence rang in her ears. On the third day, she decided something had to be done. She entered the room, closed the door behind her, and then she heard it. Not a voice, a muffled moan. In the corner sat someone else, too tall, too thin, with a long face. It didn't move, but its eyes slowly blinked. Peppa clasped both hooves over her mouth, tried not to breathe, and then the figure turned its head, slowly, exactly. Peppa bolted from the room. Since then, she kept the door locked, taped shut. But every night, she heard heavy breathing behind it. And each morning, a message appeared on the wall near the door. "You spoke. Peppa Pig." The second window. Peppa's room had always had one window. Everyone knew that. Peppa, Mummy Pig, Daddy Pig, even George. From that window, she could see their yard, the swing, the flower bed. Everything was normal. But one morning, Peppa woke up and felt an unusual chill. She yawned, stretched, sat up in bed, and froze. On the other wall, there was a window, a second one. It had never been there before. Peppa jumped out of bed and walked up to it. It was narrower and taller than her usual window. The frame was dark, old, the glass cloudy like it had a layer of dust. Beyond it was a forest. Not their yard, not the street, a forest. Tall grey trees without leaves. A pale sky. Mist curling between the trunks. Peppa backed away. She looked through her usual window. There was their yard. George was playing with his dinosaur. Everything as it should be. She turned back to the second window. The forest. Still. But it felt like someone was hiding behind the trees, watching. "Mummy?" she called. Mummy Pig came up the stairs and entered the room. "Yes, Peppa? I have a window." "Of course you have a window," Mummy smiled. "Everything's fine." "No, not that one. Another one. There's a forest." Mummy looked where Peppa pointed. "There's a wall, sweetie," she said. "You probably had a dream. Try to sleep a little more." And she left. Peppa stayed alone. The window was still there. During the day, she tried to forget, played with George, drew pictures. But when she returned to her room in the evening, the window had moved lower, almost level with her eyes. The forest was the same, but the mist was thicker, and there was a figure among the trees, black, still. The face was unclear. Peppa pulled the curtain shut, tight, and stayed away. At night, she woke up. The curtain had been pushed aside. A pale light shone from the window, and Peppa saw the figure had moved closer. It was now standing right at the glass. It didn't move, but now she could see the face. It looked like her, just stretched, eyes too wide, a thin, strange smile. Peppa screamed. Mummy ran in. The light came on. The window was gone. "You had another dream, darling," said Mummy. "Everything's all right." But Peppa didn't believe her. The next morning, the window was back, on a different wall. Every day it changed position, sometimes behind the bed, sometimes beside the door. The forest never changed. The figure kept getting closer. Peppa started leaving notes on the windowsill. "Who are you?" she wrote. But in the morning, they'd be gone. And one morning, words had been scratched into the glass from the inside. "You look out the window, but I'm inside." That day, Peppa didn't go to school. She sat in the corner of her room, by her normal window, breathing quietly. From behind her, a rustle. The curtain moved on its own. She didn't turn around. Now, the window is always there. But no one else sees it. Not Mummy, not Daddy. Even George says there's nothing there. And sometimes, at night, it opens.